Picture this, it's 1879. A 16-year-old kid decides he's done with the family farm, turns his back on it all, and heads for the big city, for Detroit. Now this was a time when the world moved at the speed of a horse. But this kid, Henry Ford, he had a vision that seemed absolutely impossible. This isn't just the story of a car company, it's the story of how a farm boy helped build the modern world we live in today. And this right here, this was his whole mission, the one big idea that drove everything he did. See, cars back then were basically toys for the super rich. Ford's idea wasn't about that. It was about building a machine that could change everyone's life. It was a crazy, audacious goal, and it all started with a simple fascination for how things work. You see, Henry Ford's journey didn't start in some fancy engineering school or a big factory. Nope. It started with him absolutely hating the slow, back-breaking work of being a farmer and being completely obsessed with how things ticked. And I mean that literally. This timeline really shows you how his mind was wired. At just 12 years old, his dad gives him a pocket watch. What's the first thing he does? He takes it apart completely and then puts it back together just to see how it works. He got so good at it, he became the go-to watch repair guy in his neighborhood. A year later, he sees a steam engine for the first time, and that little spark of curiosity just explodes. By 15, he's building his own. So when his mother tragically passes away, that was it. The last thing tying him to a farm life he hated was gone. He packed his bags for Detroit to chase the world of machines. So in Detroit, while he's working as an engineer for the Edison Illuminating Company, he comes across the internal combustion engine. It was a game changer, smaller, faster, and way more efficient than the clunky steam engines he was used to. This was the key. He dove headfirst into this new tech, and in 1896, working out of a tiny shed behind his house, he built his first car, the quadricycle. I mean, it was basically two bikes strapped together with a little gas engine, but you know what? It worked. That was the very first step toward his grand vision. But here's the thing, success was anything but a straight line. Before Henry Ford could build an empire, he had to learn how to fail. And oh boy, did he fail spectacularly. These early attempts weren't just mistakes. They were the essential education that made everything else possible. Take his first company, the Detroit Automobile Company. It just fell apart. First off, his investors wanted to sell cars like yesterday. But Ford was a perfectionist, always tinkering, trying to improve the design. Then, the supply chain was a total mess. The factory would just sit idle, waiting for a part from some other company. All of this led to the biggest problem. They were painfully slow. They only managed to make 20 cars in 2 years. The whole thing folded, and Ford was out on his own. But for a guy like Ford, this wasn't the end. Not even close. This quote right here perfectly captures how he thought. He wasn't defeated. He was probably relieved. The pressure was off. Now he could take everything he just learned from that disaster and start over. But this time, he'd be smarter about it. So he tries again. But, you guessed it, the exact same conflict pops up. His new investors wanted affordable cars for regular people, but Ford was obsessed with building race cars. Why? Well, because back in the early 1900s, winning races was the absolute best way to prove your engineering was the real deal. This clash of ideas led to him leaving his second company, and that company, well, it got reorganized and became the Cadillac Motor Company. Small world, huh? Okay, so after failing twice, Ford knew what didn't work. He desperately needed a system to build cars quickly and efficiently, a way to solve those production nightmares that killed his first company. And believe it or not, the inspiration he needed came from the most unlikely of places. This was it. This was the big aha moment. He's on a trip to Chicago, and he sees a slaughterhouse's disassembly line, where each worker had one specific job in taking an animal carcass apart. And he had this flash of insight. What if he just reversed it? Instead of taking something apart piece by piece, he could build something up. He took an idea from one industry and used it to completely revolutionize another. And this really shows you how huge that change was. Before Ford, a team of highly skilled craftsmen would build a car from the ground up, all in one spot. It was incredibly slow and super expensive. Ford's moving assembly line flipped that on its head. The car now came to the worker. Each person did one simple, repeatable task over and over again. The result? The time it took to build a single car dropped from over 12 hours to just 90 minutes. The result of this one idea was just staggering. I mean, look at this chart. By 1914, the Ford Motor Company was making more cars than every other American carmaker combined. This wasn't just a small improvement. This was total and complete domination of the market, all thanks to an idea he got from a slaughterhouse. So with his production problem completely solved, Ford could finally get back to his original mission,
building that car for the great multitude. But to pull it off, he had to pair his manufacturing revolution with an economic one that was just as radical.
That was the price of the very first Model T back in 1908. Now, that's about $21,000 in today's money, so yes, still pretty expensive. But the car was so simple and reliable that they got 15,000 orders almost overnight. But Ford's real plan was just getting started.
As his assembly line got faster and more efficient, he did something nobody saw coming. He dropped the price. And I mean, he drastically dropped it. By 1916, you could get a brand new Model T for less than $400. He was passing the savings from his new efficiency directly to the customer, making the dream of owning a car a reality for millions of people.
But now, he had a brand new problem. Turns out, working on the assembly line was mind-numbingly boring and repetitive. Workers were quitting like crazy. So to solve this, he introduced another revolutionary idea, the $5 day. He more than doubled the daily wage and cut an hour off the workday. The Wall Street Journal literally called it an economic crime and said he'd go bankrupt.
But it was an absolute stroke of genius. The high wage stopped the constant turnover and attracted the best mechanics in the country to his factories. But here's the masterstroke. It turned his own workers into customers. He was creating a new middle class that could actually afford to buy the very cars they were building. That move right there sealed his success.
So Ford had reached the absolute pinnacle of success. But the same intense, single-minded focus that got him to the top would ironically become his greatest weakness and eventually lead to his decline.
See, after he bought out all his investors, Ford had absolute 100% control. And he got stubborn. He truly believed the Model T was the perfect car, the only car anyone would ever need. He famously said customers could have it in any color so long as it is black. Meanwhile, competitors like Chevy and Chrysler started offering more comfort, more style, and more color choices. Ford's sales just plummeted. By 1936, he'd gone from number 1 all the way down to number 3.
He did have one last great innovation left in him, the first mass-produced, affordable V8 engine in 1932. It was a masterpiece of engineering, and it proved that the old spark was still there. But the market had moved on, and his one-man rule style just couldn't keep up. He finally handed control of the company over to his grandson, Henry Ford II, and retired. In the end, this quote really feels like the perfect way to sum up his life. It was a journey of incredible vision, sure, but it was also defined by huge failures and personal loss. Every single setback, from leaving the farm to his first 2 companies going bankrupt, was a lesson that pushed him forward, shaping the man who would ultimately put the entire world on wheels. And all this leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. Ford's assembly line wasn't just about making cars, it was a system that fundamentally changed work, money, and society itself. So when you look at our world today, at things like artificial intelligence or gene editing, what is our generation's assembly line? What's the one innovation that's quietly remaking our world right now, just like Ford's did 100 years ago?